Welcome to Bridging Gaps, the business podcast sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners.
Hello, I'm Deborah Levitt, your host for Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. This week, I'm in conversation with Rhiannon Ford, the award-winning owner of Rhiannon Ford Divorce Consultancy. Rhiannon and I talk about her business, the impact of divorce, how she defined her business model, and managing her own well-being whilst running a business. Please join me in welcoming Rhiannon to the show. Hi, Rhiannon. How are you?
Hi, Deborah. I'm fine, thank you.
I'm really pleased that you were able to join me today, so thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Rhiannon, as I mentioned, obviously in the company name, it kind of gives it away that you're a divorce consultant. Do you want to just share with us what it is that, a divorce consultant does?
Well, I created the business model from scratch. So I can only tell you what I do as a divorce consultant. So my aim is to support and guide people through divorce and separation. So people come to me at all different stages of the divorce and separation process. And I recognised that there was additional support outside what was available from solicitors that people could benefit from when they're going through a challenging time in their lives. So I sort of created this service, which is sort of building, and I'm adding bits and pieces to it all the time. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be coming up to my 8-year anniversary, which is quite exciting. Very exciting.
So what led you to realize that there was this, I guess, gap where people did need the extra support?
I was previously a family law solicitor. So my background is that I was a divorce lawyer. And it was when my parents actually, so it's a very personal reason, my parents went through divorce after a 35-year marriage when I was practicing as a solicitor. And I was able to, my mum particularly needed some support, and I was able to find her a family law solicitor. But I really recognised that there was so much more help and support and guidance that she needed at that time that actually wasn't readily available in the marketplace for me to direct her to. So I ended up providing it myself. And then realizing that actually there must be other people who are in a similar situation to mum who could also benefit from that type of additional support.
And when you talk about the other types of support, what types of things do you mean? How do you support people in addition to advice?
Sure. It varies on the individual. The way I sort of describe it to potential clients is I wear two hats. So because of my legal background, I have my sort of divorce consultant hat. So I can provide them with, one of my clients describes it as providing them with the inside scoop of how the legal process works, so that they can have a good understanding, feel that they're sort of informed about how things work, feel more in control really of the process. So I use my legal knowledge and background to help people understand what to expect and also to point them in the right direction, how to find a solicitor, etc. And then the other hat I wear is when I left private practice as a solicitor, I trained as a personal development coach. So I also provide support through coaching. So coping strategies, communication skills, that sort of thing to help people on a more personal and practical level through the process.
And do you find that one of those tends to be used more, or is it a fairly even split by how much you use both sets of skills?
I would say it's a real mix, and I'll be putting on my different hats constantly throughout each meeting actually with the client. And also what sometimes happens is when people have read about the different types of help I can provide, I've had a few clients who've said, I only want this type of help that you offer. And actually in the first meeting, I end up giving the other type of help, as it were, as well. So I think that the aim for me is that I want to help the individual who's going through this challenging time in their life, rather than them being another person going through divorce. It's how can I help this particular person with what's going on for them, navigate through this process and put them in the best position possible to recover from it and move on.
Yeah, because it is a big upheaval. Whether you've been married 35 years or, a shorter marriage, it's a big change and it's a huge decision. So having somebody there, I guess, on your side must really help people.
Sure. And I would say probably the majority of my clients come to me at what I would call the very early stages. So the majority of people, when I first start working with them, are either considering divorce. So some people are still together. I only work with one of the couple. So they might want to talk through with somebody independent of friends or family. So it's confidential, their concerns and what they should be thinking about. Also people who've maybe made the decision but don't feel quite ready to embark on the formal process and want some help. I act sort of as a facilitator there to sort of put things in place, find the right professionals to help them and help them prepare for what happens next. Or I also work with clients where the decision's been made for them. So it's their spouse that wants to move ahead with a separation or divorce, and they're finding it quite difficult and want some additional support to manage what's going on.
If somebody is thinking about divorce, do you find that if they come to you that they feel like they've taken a step towards it, or that they have just opened up a door to discuss to see if it is the right thing and where they want to go? So you know how sometimes you've almost made the decision, but you don't really want to acknowledge it?
I think I probably get a mixture of people, and normally they're quite clear what they want to meet me for. And also I always ask them at the beginning of the meeting, what would you like? What do you want the outcome of this meeting to be? So I'm very clear what they're wanting to achieve. And I'm also make it very clear that I'm not all about trying to support them in any one particular decision. So even though my background was I was a divorce solicitor, I'm not wanting to sort of encourage people by any stretch of the imagination to take divorce proceedings. And I have had clients over the last few years who have reconciled. So they've wanted to talk it through. They want to find out. So I'm not a marriage guidance counsellor, so I'm not a therapist. So when the people come to me rather than the therapist, they want to talk through what would happen if I made the decision, ... sort of thing. And so we talk in sort of hypothetical terms, and it's very much left for them to leave the meeting with the information they needed for them to have a think about it, and obviously come back to me if they want any more additional help on top of that.
So at that stage, it's almost an information source from somebody who, as you say, is neutral, who can has the knowledge to be able to talk about what's going to happen, but
yeah,
committing in any way, sense or form, not even to you, actually. They're just, I can come have this one meeting, think about it some more and decide what I want to do.
Absolutely. I would say the first meeting, in whatever position anybody's in, is normally a fact-finding exercise for them. And hopefully to help them get some clarity about their thinking and how they feel about things.
Yeah, because it's an emotional time, isn't it? And what about the children? I know obviously not every divorce is going to include children, but do people talk to you about their children and the impact on their family as well? Or are they focused on the more immediate split, I guess?
Very much so. I think for people that have children, that's normally their biggest concern. And often people don't want to take divorce proceedings, however unhappy they are, because they want to keep the family unit intact for the sake of the children. I often get asked my opinion on what I think the impact might be, which is very difficult, obviously, to advise on. But I do talk a lot about children. And in actual fact, the solicitors do help with the children issues, but not as much as they would necessarily with regards to finances or the procedural part of getting divorced or separated. So I actually do work quite a lot with my clients about things such as how to tell the children, and discussing with them how to approach creating a parenting plan, how best to communicate with their ex on children arrangements, that sort of thing. So I do work actually quite a lot with the children in the family.
Which is great, because my parents divorced when I was 12, I think. And it really, it has a huge impact and how the parents deal with it. And I've seen it in, I guess, friends and other people in my life, and you watch some of these patterns and you think, well, there must be a better way to do it, where yes, you guys don't want to live together anymore. And actually, I firmly believe that if you're unhappy living together, you shouldn't continue being together, because that's just going to make it worse for the children.
Sure.
But equally, you're divorcing the person, not the child.
Absolutely. And all the experts seem to say, so I do a lot of reading around the subject to help sort of give guidance on supporting children through divorce and separation. And what all the child psychologists seem to say is it's not that mum and dad are getting divorced that is likely to have the biggest impact on the children. It's how the parents actually approach and deal with the divorce. And as you say, they're divorcing their spouse. There's still always going to be a family and their parents, and they will need to create a productive co-working, co-parenting relationship to be able to continue to be parents after the separation and divorce.
And I think this was something that you posted recently, Rhiannon. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over your name, Rhiannon. That there was an article, and it was about somebody who had a child they weren't married, but they had I can't remember what they called it, a pre-parenting plan or something like that. So they've kind of thought through all of the different aspects of, bringing up a child together, and were successfully parenting as two separate individuals. And I thought that was really interesting, and could see that potentially working in a marriage as well, if as part of your discussions were, well, let's agree some of these things, let's sort it out, let's hope we never have to use it.
I think it's very organized as well, isn't it? I think a lot of people, in my opinion, I've got to be careful here, when they a couple get together and they get married and they plan to have a family. I think for a lot of people, and I know this from friends who've said this to me, you don't necessarily have the big chats about, do we have the same, will we have the same parenting style? What will happen if ... They sort of just think it would be lovely. We love each other. It would be lovely to have a child together. And I'm not obviously suggesting that's wrong. But I think thinking these things through, it's not thinking expecting the worst, but just being prepared and open-minded. And I actually think it can bring people together if they talk about difficult topics rather than make things awkward. So I think, yes, I know it was an interesting article, wasn't it? I hadn't come across it before, which is why I posted about it.
Yeah, and I was really interested to just see how it all worked. And it was a great article. And I think, as you say, having those discussions, and I think to me, it reminds me of a contract. And I know when I've done contracts with people from a business perspective or whatever, and people are saying, well, we don't need that. And it's like, well, the contract is for when we're not friends, and hopefully we never need it. So right now we're talking about when we're not friends, and we need that in place, and, but we are, so life's good. And it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? It's like, I don't want to think about not having a child or us having major differences, about how we bring them up. But we have that conversation to prevent the problems and to hopefully never get to the divorce situation.
Absolutely. I think it can just give peace of mind, can't it? That it's being thought through, and it's being prepared and getting over those difficult conversations as well. I think, because people feel, as you say, is as if you're hoping for the worst to happen, and it's not that at all. And as you say, you don't need it. Brilliant. Don't have to worry about it.
And now this is, possibly, I was going to say it's a bit more lighthearted, but I think it is actually quite serious as well. Pets.
Okay.
Well, because pets are part of the family, and quite often, they're not necessarily one person's pets. And I have actually seen, people who are trying to do pet sharing, or one of them feels hurt or whatever, because the dog now is officially the other person's. And
sure.
And there's challenges around that. And I didn't know if that's something that ever comes up, for you when people are talking about it.
I'm always quite interested, as you know, I'm a big animal lover. And it does come up quite a bit. In my experience, what tends to happen is the dog, if I'm just saying, because that seems to be what comes up the most, goes with the children wherever the children are. So if the children are having time at dad's house for the weekend or the week, the dog tends to go with the children, so that the children never are without their pet. So in my experience, that tends to be how people have arranged it. But I have had couples who don't have children who have had a parenting arrangement for the pets, where they've spent some time with one and some time with another. But it can be quite difficult. There isn't actually any guidance in law in the UK about how pets are to be approached, which I think will come. I'm sure it will. We're a little bit slow. I think sometimes there's lots of changes that should be taking place really in our legal system for divorce and separation. But they are such a huge part of the family that they need to be given careful consideration. So I always take it very seriously if somebody wants my advice on how best to approach it. But I haven't ever so far had a situation where there's been a big dispute. Luckily, it tends to be that they've either reached the agreement between themselves if there aren't children, or the pet goes with the children wherever the children may be. So far it's been relatively straightforward.
Well, and that's quite nice, actually, if you know that the children and the dog come together, that you're getting, the children benefit from it, but so does the parent, because they know they're getting as you say, we'll go with dogs because that's the one most likely to move.
Sure.
But I know, well, as you know, I might be a little bit in love with my borrowed dog. But Woody's very adaptable, and he doesn't seem to mind. So he goes between 3 houses now, because he goes to, the owner that I see as his owner, but her former partner, and to me. And he's very relaxed about it. But not all animals are they?
Sure.
So some of them can be quite stressful if they don't quite know, especially if one of the homes is new.
Yeah, or if one of the couple has a new partner that the pet doesn't know. So yes, it can be quite complicated, I think. But I think staying with the children probably helps that, because whatever challenges the parent has, they're doing it for the children. It's the family pet, it's the children's pet. So I think that would be the way to do it. That would be how I would advise people to approach it, I think.
So if we backtrack a little bit, Rhiannon, and just to talk about, you mentioned earlier that you were, in family law before you were a divorce solicitor. So what took you from being in that, in a law practice to deciding to set up on your own, apart from, the impact of your parents' divorce on you? Sure.
I actually suffered from a chronic health condition. So, I suppose I have it, but I sort of manage it. But I had a big flare up at the end of my 20s. So I was re-diagnosed with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. And so I was given no choice really, but to take an extended break from work. I think I'd always intended to go back, but actually while I was recovering, I was thinking through different options and had obviously a big realization of how important self-care was. I'd sort of worked myself into the ground really, and it's taken its toll on my health. Took quite a long time to recover, and so I decided actually I didn't want to go back into private practice, but still very much enjoyed family law work. And then as we've said already, with the experience of my parents and divorce, and realizing that actually there was this gap in the marketplace for this additional help and support that I thought that people could benefit from. So it was very sort of personal reasons. So there's a reason. My health, I think, brought me out of private practice, and had I maybe not had my flare up with my health condition, I may still be in private practice. I don't know, but having that time and space while I was recovering, thinking through mum and dad's situation and different options, and self-care and protecting my health so I wasn't ill again. I think it sort of was accumulation of things really that made me think, well, actually I'm going to work for myself and try and have this work-life balance that everybody talks about, which I haven't quite succeeded in achieving, but there we go.
People I speak to aren't quite there.
It's a work in progress.
So how did you find that transition, especially because you weren't you were trying to, as you said, you were designing your own business model. You were doing something that was new. So how did that feel both emotionally and practically in terms of actually getting business and getting clients
Sure.
and the feelings that we all get when we're trying something new and different?
Very scary is probably the best answer. I hadn't ever thought I was going to be self-employed and be a business owner. I'd wanted to be a lawyer since I was about 12. My father's a solicitor or retired solicitor. And so I was never I was always a very cautious person. I liked security, an employed job, structure. I mean, I suited being a lawyer very well, really, in that sense. So it was a big gamble, really, to think, well, I'm going to start something, not only start my own business, but actually create a business model from scratch. People aren't going to know that this service exists, and how do I get clients? I really didn't know what I was doing, to be honest. I just decided at the beginning that I saw that there was a market for this type of work. Originally, in actual fact, it was going to be a hobby job. So it was going to be a part-time venture because I was very passionate about it. But I think it was a confidence thing. Didn't know whether it had legs or whether I was going to be a good business person, because it's not just doing the job, it's running the business, obviously, behind it. So I sort of started thinking, well, I might do something else as well. And actually, it just took off, and I really enjoyed it. And it's just sort of built from there, really. And that's sort of the last 8 years. And I very much work full time. Is the polite way of putting it. I do quite silly hours. So it was just sort of something that it was a passion of mine that's actually turned into, a really sort of enjoyable business for me, which is great.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic because, when you're doing something that you love and you get a lot out of, it doesn't feel like work.
No.
It feels so good, doesn't it? So what about so as you mentioned there's not just doing what you do in terms of providing the support to people, providing the coaching and the more practical, inside scoop, but there's all of those other business things that you have to do because there's nobody else to do them. How did you find those elements of running your own business?
I think I was probably, I know I was very naive. And I just sort of felt my way a little bit, really. I don't think I realized all the different elements and how many hats you actually have to wear as a business owner. I started my business because I enjoyed the thought of doing the work. So it was a huge learning curve, and having to learn new skills but it still was enjoyable. And actually, it's an ongoing process. I don't think I'll ever feel, oh, gosh, yes, I've got it all sussed now, because there's always new technology, there's always new ways of approaching things. So I used to go on sort of, I don't think they run them anymore, sort of the free government workshops in how to start your own business, and it really started very basic. I was very lucky actually with how I started getting clients. So at the time I was working with a careers coach, and I had thought about what I do in a sort of very sort of embryonic stage whilst I was recovering from my relapse with my ME, but I just didn't have the confidence to think of it being a business. And so I was thinking of other things. And I just remember Kate, who was my coach at the time, saying, look, is there anything else that you would love to do, but you just don't have the confidence to actually try? And she just caught me on a good day. So I was brave enough to say, well, I've got this idea and I've written these notes and I've put them in a file and they've been there for like 4 years and I've done nothing about it. And she was just very encouraging of it, as coaches should be, I suppose. But anyway, I just genuinely, she just seemed to think, she just got what I was sort of describing. And the following week, she rang me to say, I found you your first client. Now, I hadn't actually decided at that point that I was launching the business. At that time, I was just sort of thinking it through. And it was a lady actually who had been recommended to see Kate. She'd actually been given a voucher by one of her friends for her birthday for some coaching. And when Kate met her, she discovered that actually this lady was going through a divorce and had been going through this divorce for quite some time and was really struggling with it. And actually what she needed was some practical hands-on help from somebody who knew the process and understood what her challenges were and could help her with the paperwork, and she could talk things through with. So she told this lady about me. And so Kate rang me saying, there's a lady ringing you tomorrow. She's your first client. I've just made up what you're charging. So that was sort of baptism by fire, really. And I'm so pleased she did that, because I think it showed that she got what I wanted to do. So sometimes you just need that support, don't you, from other people to sort of give you that bit of a push to make it happen. I think I might still be sort of wondering whether I should get that file of notes out of the cabinet otherwise. And then and she was a lovely lady, and I really was just sort of feeling my way. She didn't know she was my first client. She does now. We're actually quite good friends now, which is lovely. And I remember going to meet her in a quiet coffee shop and talking through where she was in the process and what she was finding stressful, what she was finding difficult. And I remember asking her what would make a difference, what would she find helpful? And she got quite upset, and she talked about this form that everybody has to do, called a Form-E, a financial statement. It's when you collect together all your financial information before you can start negotiating for the financial settlement in a divorce. And she just found it very intimidating. And it was always her husband who'd been in charge of the family finances. She just didn't, it was just too much. Mm-hmm. And so as having been previously a solicitor, I've done a lot of Form-Es. So I offered to come to her house the following day and sit with her and do the form together. And I was quite taken aback. She, bless her, and she won't mind me saying this, I'm sure, she got quite tearful, got up from the table and came around the other side of the table, gave me a big hug and a kiss and said, I'm so pleased you're in my life. And that's when I just thought, I need to do this. And it sounds very sort of soppy, but I just thought, gosh, I hadn't quite appreciated that actually there is so much more support and guidance people need that actually I can just do naturally. I don't have to retrain. I've actually got the skills and experience that I can just help people straight away. And my next two clients were her two best friends. And then it just sort of went from there, really. So the way I run my business for the first few years was very much through word of mouth. So it's quite difficult to market, or I was finding it quite challenging to market divorce. It's people find it uncomfortable. They don't want to think they'll ever need it. So even going to sort of business networking events and you swap your business cards with people, a lot of people wouldn't take mine because they'd think their spouse might think, even though they had a big chunk of them from everybody else, that. So that was probably my biggest challenge, was the marketing. So word of mouth, and now with being 8 years on, it's a lot of my referrals come from old clients. I work a lot with solicitors, and solicitors refer clients to me. And I do most of my marketing through social media platforms, because I find it sort of quite a private and more subtle way of people finding out about the services that I can provide, rather than a big advert in a magazine or something, which people might feel a bit uncomfortable looking at if somebody were to see and think, oh gosh, they're going through a divorce.
Yeah, well, and it's a very personal thing. So,
absolutely.
And private. So you're not necessarily ready even to, possibly not even to acknowledge it completely to yourself. So having that, okay, well, I've read this, or actually she just posts interesting articles. So, it's kind of getting to know you before they can go, oh, actually, maybe I will just go and have a chat.
Sure.
And yeah, because I can understand that feeling of, oh, I don't really want to tell somebody I need this. So the gentler approach. So on the side of social media, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I'm pretty sure that you were really uncomfortable with the idea of doing blogs. Would that be correct, Rhiannon?
Well, I tend to have quite a lot to say. So actually, I find blogging, it was quite strange when I first started it, and I got some great advice from a colleague who's running her own business, and she just said to write as if you were talking to your clients. And that was great advice. So I do quite a lot of blogging on different subjects for various reasons, really, to obviously to showcase what I do, but also to provide information. And a lot of, I would say probably the majority of my blogs are free tips and advice as well. So people can, as you've said, it's a very private time in somebody's life when they're going through or considering divorce and separation, and they can see those blogs on social media and jot down those tips or print out that blog with the advice without anybody needing to know about it. And my blogs are very client focused. So what I do when I write a blog is I have a particular client in mind, and I write to, well, it's a particular lady, I write to her when I'm writing my blogs. So it did take a while to get rid of all the legal jargon that I would use as a solicitor and actually communicate to the client, the person that would not know the legal jargon and doesn't need to necessarily know the legal jargon. And I try to cover sort of lots of different topics because lots of different things obviously can come up. So yes, I do quite a lot of blogging.
No, which is absolutely fantastic because, you know, as you say, starting off from not being sure about it or how to put it down or how to approach it to doing what you do now, I think is a really great transformation. So wonderful.
Thank you.
Even as well, you know, and I'm, you know, not getting divorced because I'm not married. So it's unlikely that the divorce is necessary. Unless Woody splits up with me.
Oh, disaster.
I'll be borrowing Max. By the way, Max is
absolutely fine.
Rhiannon's dog is called Max. Just in case anybody listening is wondering. And Woody is the dog I borrow. So taking those steps, though, and what I was trying to say was actually that, you know, there are some of them that I look at and I think, okay, that's not relevant to me. But then ones like the one you posted the other day, I thought, well, actually, that's quite interesting. Yeah. I'm curious about how people are approaching it. So there's quite a mix, I would think, of people that you get reading it, you know, not just the potential clients, but just out of, you know, a general interest on what is happening.
Absolutely. And that's why I try and keep it sort of quite varied. And also, nobody knows if they'll ever need my services. You know, nobody gets married thinking they'll ever be in a situation where they're facing divorce. So you know, quite a few clients I've worked with over the years, I met quite some time ago in very different circumstances, whether it be through networking, whether we used to work together, and they had never thought that they would require my services, but their memory had been jogged about what I do from seeing the various blogs that I put on my social media platforms. So that's great because it's just sort of, you know, people need to know that that service is available as and when they need it, or should they know somebody that might need it.
Well, and there's something about having that trust factor as well. So if somebody knows you or knew you previously, or they're recommended to you by somebody else, that there's the trust in feeling that's somebody I could go and talk to because of however they've been referred through. So Rhiannon, you know, you're doing all of this blogging, it's working in terms of, you know, attracting people and informing them as well. And if I'm not mistaken, you've won a couple of awards around this.
I have. Thank you for mentioning it. No, it's very exciting. Yes, this year has been very exciting. In March, I won the Gold Award at the Surrey Digital Awards 2018 for use of social media in business. Which was very exciting. And I had to go up on stage and be interviewed, which I hadn't realised. So that was quite good fun. And then and that was a competition that I'd entered. And then they had a panel of independent judges to decide. And then in May, I was notified that I'd been selected as one of the top 10 divorce blogs to follow in the UK for 2018, which is very exciting. And I didn't know anything about that. So that wasn't a competition that I'd entered. Big Brother was watching. And I was just sort of notified and given a lovely little badge to put on my website to prove that. So that was great, because I worked quite hard. That is my main marketing sort of strategy, is using social media to sort of make sure that the message gets out there. But it has helped actually sort of for other professionals to remember what I do as well. And I have had clients come to me having seen that I've won the awards, which is quite interesting. So it's always sort of worth making sure that you sort of put yourself out there. You've got to be in it to win it, as it were.
Exactly. So, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
2 in 1 year, and we're not even halfway through the year.
I know. Exciting.
When you go to, when you've developed your business model, so as you said before, it was something that you came up with and has evolved over time. Have you found that you have essentially created a market that other people are now jumping in on the act?
Yes. So when I first started, I was calling myself a divorce coach. So I just finished my coaching training and I was calling myself a divorce coach. And at the time, there wasn't anybody who seemed to be doing what I did. There were, when I did some research, because you sort of Google sort of obviously, well, who else is doing things, see your competitors and things. There were a couple of people that started coming up, calling themselves divorce coaches, but they were offering quite a different service to me. So I decided to change my branding to divorce consultancy, because I wanted, and I thought it was important to differentiate myself from the divorce coaches, because I did have a legal background and I was providing advice. I don't provide formal legal advice. I'm not insured as a solicitor. That's for the solicitors to do. That's absolutely fine. But I do, because of my background, I do provide support and guidance with the legal process. Whereas at that point, and obviously this is 8 years ago now, the people who I had found on the internet anyway, working as divorce coaches, tended to be ladies who perhaps had been through a difficult divorce themselves, who then wanted to help other ladies going through the same. So they were doing it obviously for good reasons, but my concern was that they didn't have the legal background, or possibly they might have been too emotionally attached to their own experience. And what I hopefully can do is provide a completely neutral environment, rather than talking from personal experience that these other people used to do. Since I've started at my consultancy and since it's been sort of building up, I have been approached over the years by various solicitors who have been looking at options about what else they could do if they were to leave private practice, and have either been solicitors who've been already working with me, or had heard about me, or seen me on social media, and wanted to find out how I'd created my business, which is really tricky to answer, because they're basically asking me for my business model. And I always want to help people and support other people. And normally I would do as much as I can, but it is quite difficult, because it's very much my personal experience and how I've built up what I do. So it would be quite difficult to just say, this is what you do, and then you'll have the same business as me. So it is quite difficult, I think, but there are other people. There are now a few people who do similar things to me, but there's room for everybody, and we're obviously all got a slightly different take on things and how we approach things, slightly different background, skill set, etc. And unfortunately, with the high rates of divorce and separation in the UK, there are lots of people that need help. So, not one person can look after everybody. So we need to have, different people doing a similar type of work to make sure everybody has access to that type of help.
And it must be, though, in some ways, while it feels kind of, oh, you're asking me to give it away, but also in other ways, rewarding, because it's a compliment that they can see what you're doing, they can see that it's working, and that they want to emulate that. So it's, what is it they say? Flattery is the best form of, imitation is the best form of flattery.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's lovely. And also, I give too much away because I'm so passionate about what I do, and I get so excited about what I do that if people ask me direct questions, I'll just tell them. So, but yes, no, it's lovely that people, particularly other members of the legal profession, it's lovely because I do get asked by solicitors, why did you leave private practice? And some of them, you can sort of tell when they ask that some of them are thinking, because I'd like to get out as well. So can you help me with it? And then others are like, why would you ever want to do anything else? You know, it's an amazing job. So it's quite interesting. But I would say every solicitor I've met has asked me that question, why? And you can see them then thinking about how I answer that and okay. So it's quite interesting. But no, you're right. It's lovely that people are recognizing that it's a valuable service and want to do the same thing. Quite exciting, really.
Yeah, exactly. Because as you say, there is so much more divorce and separation. And something I read about actually quite a while ago was that there's something about, because we now live so much longer, that in reality, you might have been married for 35 years, however many hundreds of years ago, but then you would have died.
Yeah.
Because that was our lifespan was pretty short. And that now that we're living so much longer, that there's almost, you could be married for 40 years and then potentially still be married for another 20 or 30 years, depending on your longevity. So have you noticed anything around that where there's, I guess, that golden or silver divorcee sort of thing? I know there's a term, I just can't remember it.
Silver splitters or silver. Yes, it's not a very pleasant phrase. Or the other phrase, particularly that they use in America, is the grey divorces.
Okay.
Referring to people's grey hair because they're older generation. I would say actually that there is a growing number of people who are choosing to divorce later in life. And I think there's various reasons for that. As you've said, because we're living longer, for people to retire, or the empty nest syndrome of when, the youngest child goes off to university or wherever, it can have a big impact on people. So I think I've worked with a few people, sort of older couples who, once the youngest child has left home, they've suddenly realized that actually they don't really have much in common with their spouse, that they were very much centered around the children and the children's lives. And then the thought of, at age 50, oh gosh, I could live another 30, 40 years. Do I want to be with this person for that length of time? Because that's a lifetime in itself. And spending a lot of time together, because you're normally sort of nearing retirement. So it's sort of quite intense if you don't get on with them. So there is a growing number of people, I think, wanting to separate or divorce later in life because they still see that they have a lot of life left. I think they find it sometimes harder. So I'm just thinking about a couple of clients I'm working with at the moment. And even though the children have left, and it's not that they're worried about the impact it might have on the children, they have had a whole lifetime with one particular person. And it can be quite daunting to think, I don't know how life works as an independent person. They may have met at school, in university, they might have been together for sort of 30 to 40 years. To then think about starting again, some people find that prospect exciting, but I would say everybody, to a certain extent that I've worked with in that age bracket, has also found it very daunting.
You've grown up together, haven't you?
Absolutely.
You married or were together that young. You've gone through all of that learning, and as you say, you're almost codependent, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but codependent. And one person deals with this because you're bad at it, so you deal with that because they're bad at this.
Absolutely. That happens a lot when couples separate, in fact, whatever their age is. But I think it's particularly difficult for couples who've been married for a very long time. So irrespective of the age, if they've been married for a very long time, you're right. When people are in relationships, they tend to take on different roles within that relationship. I've got an old school friend who calls them pink jobs and blue jobs. I mean, obviously that's a little bit sexist. She can get away with that. She's a woman. But she has certain things that she has control over in the family. And then her husband has different jobs. And what I find is when a couple split up, the a lot of people worry about their lack of skills in one particular area. So I often hear from my clients, whatever age they are, oh, but my husband used to always be the one to do that, or my wife used to be the one that always used to do that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. And I actually work with people post-divorce as well. So I'm working with two ladies at the moment where I'm helping them to realize that they can actually either learn new skills, delegate, or at least be more confident and become calmer about things that they don't know about, and not forgetting what they are still very good at. That the which their ex probably is thinking, gosh, well, I'm not very good at that. I think for the older couples, it's even harder because you've been, or the people in long-term relationships anyway, because you've been running that sort of relationship dynamic for a long period of time. So to then think at the age of 60, and I don't mean this to sound unkind to chaps, but I've got this case at the moment, I don't know how to use the microwave, or I don't know how to use the oven. I've been with my wife for however long. And likewise for ladies, I've got a lady client who's thinking, gosh, I've never had to manage my own money. I had my debit cards or credit cards, but my husband used to do all of that, sort out our pensions. That's very daunting. So there's quite a lot of adjustment and change when divorce takes place that actually a lot of people don't appreciate beforehand. And for friends and family as well, they don't realize that actually the person going through the divorce is going through a lot of different changes that they might need sort of a little bit of help and support with.
Yeah, because you just, life happens, doesn't it? And you see a household or a family and it's running, and you see people who are single or divorced and their life is running, and you don't necessarily see or recognize the challenges that they're facing or something. As you said with the For Me, for you, that was just, it's just a For Me.
Yeah.
I don't, it's no big deal. So you've got that skill and can very easily do it, but your client is emotional apart from anything, but it's something new. So it's bringing those together and going, okay, well, I might think this was easy, but I can now support this person in doing that. And I guess what I'm trying to say is looking at the people around you to see if there are things that you can help support them with that you take for granted.
Absolutely. I think it's really important for anybody going through a challenging time, whether it be divorce or, difficulties generally, to ensure that they have a strong support system around them. It can make all the difference. And I often use the phrase, depending on the name of the client. So, if you were my client, I'd often use the phrase like Team Deborah. I'm now part of Team Deborah. And we need to now join in somebody else. We need to find a solicitor. We may need to look at a therapist if they need, therapeutic support, maybe a financial advisor, and I sort of can help sort of facilitate that to create the professionals around that support system. And then I always encourage my clients as well to sort of, make sure they have support from friends or family, but make sure they have the right type of support and choose the right members of the family or friends who are going to give constructive support and help. But no, it can make a big difference, I think, if people have the right foundations in place. And that's why when I started the business, I would actually ask a lot of my clients, how can I help you? Rather than me telling them how I could help them. So now, having sort of rewritten the content of my website last year, I'm sort of clear that of the types of issues that will most probably come up. Everybody's obviously an individual. But in the early stages, I would go to meet a new client, or they'd ring me on the phone to find out what I did. And I would ask them what help they wanted. And I'm quite a yes person. So they'd say, would you help me with this? And I'd always want to say yes. And I do that with solicitors as well. So solicitors might call me and say, I've got, I don't know, Mrs. Jones, and she has this situation. Would you be able to help with? And then, so I'm always sort of adding to my repertoire, if you like, and knowing that actually if that person benefited from that, then that's worth me thinking about and working on to create a process or a system to help other people who might need that particular help as well. And I quite enjoy that. It's very sort of varied then what I do.
I guess it keeps that challenge coming up for you as well, to be looking at what else you can deliver, what else is going to support people and help them further, but you're still having to learn yourself and delve into something new.
Absolutely. And it keeps it interesting. And I'm a people person. I like working with people, and my aim is to make a positive difference to people, as big or as small as it may be. So I was in court this week, and we had a bit of a lull in the proceedings. We were in our meeting room, and we were chatting to the client, and she was worrying. She had quite a lot on her plate. The daughter's going to the prom and this, that, and the other. She was looking for a photographer. And I just thought, I know the perfect person. Not that I'm saying I've got the answer to everything, but actually I never know what's going to come up. And obviously that wasn't a particularly big issue for her. We were in court. We had other things going on. But anything that can take a little bit of pressure off or help people to feel supported or give them a little bit of guidance with whatever's going on in their life, I feel confident then helps them feel a bit calmer and hopefully more confident about the legal process. Because let's face it, life is complicated, and it's not just the legal process, the divorce, that will be going on for them. They'll have children going through exams, they'll have elderly parents who are unwell. There could be all sorts of things going on at the same time. When one of my clients' window fell in, I mean, ridiculous, when she tried to open it the other week. It's dreadful. She wasn't hurt, but there could be any number of things. And it's making sure that if I don't know the answer or I don't know somebody, I will help them find that person. So we can sort of do some practical things to try and alleviate some of that additional unnecessary stress that's going on for them.
Well, and I think sometimes something which somebody else finds really simple, and you might know logically in your head that it's really simple, but you just can't do it. And because of, whatever it is that's stopping you at this point, and having somebody else come along and say, do you know what? I know a photographer. Don't worry. I'll put them in touch. And they think, oh, well, I know Rhiannon, and I know she's not going to, connect me with somebody who's rubbish.
Yeah.
It just takes that pressure away, and you stop having to worry. But because I think we worry as well about why we can't do something, or lots of different things come into our heads. So I just want to go, Rhiannon, to move on, because we talked about earlier on that, you have Emmy and you'd had to take a break, which is what then led, thanks to Kate, to actually taking this step forward and making it, what it is today. But how do you look after yourself? So in general, in the world today, we talk about mental health a lot and people needing to be aware of it, but also our general well-being. And I would have thought that that's extra important to you, to make sure that you don't get to a point where you could potentially have a relapse again.
Sure. And it's always a work in progress. So I'm my own worst enemy, I think, when it comes to self-care. I think one of the things, particularly at the moment, that's been really helping me is that I'm working a lot with my clients on their self-care. So I've got constant reminders, and I'm coming out with all these suggestions and recommendations and writing these blogs and reading about the subject to help my clients. And I'm thinking, I need to be walking the walk here. So particularly over the last couple of months, because I'll be honest, I haven't been very good with my self-care practice. I think working with clients and the work I've been doing with them around their self-care has been a good reminder for me. And sometimes I do things with them. So, we might say, we talk about what they might be doing and what I might be doing, and sort of have a sort of what works for each individual or whatever. For me, definitely, I do need to be careful. And it's important for me to create structure around not just the business, but myself, and because I am the business. So if I'm not looking after myself, there is no business. And then I can't help people. So that's my sort of, I suppose, that's my motivator, really. I enjoy what I do. I enjoy making a positive difference. So it's putting myself in the best position to be able to do that. And if I'm overtired or run down or become unwell, then I can't do my job. So there's different things that I do. I have worked with a nutritionist. My osteopath is a very wise lady. I've known her for about 15 years, and she helps with muscle and joint issues, and she's a naturopath as well, and she has quite a lot of knowledge about ME and knows me very well. and gets away with telling me how it is. And having my dog actually as well. So having my dog forces me to go out for walks, to get fresh air, whatever the weather, because when you've got a Springer Spaniel, you have to go out whatever the weather. And I think that helps quite a bit. And actually, even though, I was joking earlier about not having the work-life balance, and I totally haven't got a work-life balance, but I like working from home. So I know a lot of people who run their own businesses. A lot of my colleagues find it quite lonely if they work on their own at home. I don't. I was always one of those children who needed to be all quiet and shut away to do their homework and, my law degree and at law school and everything. I wanted to sort of peace and quiet. But that helps now with my health. So having the house quiet and calm and having my work environment. So I'm in my office at the moment. It's only half decorated, so sorry, but I have very neutral colors. I've had you can't see, but I've got a new desk which is glass. I have everything. I try and create an environment to help me feel calm and relaxed, which helps with sort of physical and emotional energy. And then it's making sure I take breaks. So because I work from home, if I finish a meeting, I can take the dog for a walk and get that fresh air, and just to get out in nature and just to sort of have that break away from everything. I think self-care, because it's sort of the buzz phrase, isn't it, at the moment? And anyone reading my blogs is probably thinking, gosh, she doesn't shut up about it. But what I've realized doing quite a lot of reading around the subject for myself and my clients is that actually often we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to create a self-care practice. And yes, we do need self-care, but it actually can be the most simple of things. So often I'll say to a client, and what are you doing for yourself? What are you doing to look after yourself or whatever? And they sort of look at me, and one lady I remember rolled her eyes at me. She said, I just haven't got time. You've already because I give people homework on bits and pieces they have to do if we're in the legal process or whatever. I just don't have time. And actually I'm just as bad, I'll have a rest when I've got time to rest and that's just bonkers, isn't it? We've got to come first. And, particularly for, busy business owners or busy parents or whatever it is, we all live busy lives. It's making sure that actually having time for ourselves in whatever we individually needs to take priority, not as an afterthought. So that was one thing that came up for me fairly recently as well. And also, I remember saying to one of my clients the other day, I think we need to talk about your self-care and what you could do to sort of be looking after yourself. And she sort of sat back in her chair. She said, I don't have time to go on a spa day. And it was just quite funny that she'd automatically thought self-care, spa day. And I sort of challenged her a little bit. And I said, well, it doesn't have to be a spa day, does it? I said, that'd be lovely. I mean, if you've got time and you want to do a spa day, fantastic. But it could be that you just take some time out from the ironing or the documents I've given you to do and read some of your favorite book, or you have a nice bubble bath, or you have, a nice glass of wine or gin and tonic, whatever it is. Just any time. And it doesn't have to be for very long. It's just checking back in with ourselves to start prioritizing ourselves. And I think anybody going through a difficult time, they always come bottom of the list. So I always find that all my clients, just the thought of them thinking about themselves, they haven't got time, it's not important, I've got too much to do. And that the risk then is, of course, they could become unwell, or that emotional stress could sort of take its toll. So I think to answer, that's probably quite a long-winded answer, sorry, but to answer your question, I think actually what's helped me particularly at the moment is actually working with my clients on their self-care. And I'm actually thinking that sounds like a good idea. I think I'll do that myself.
It is interesting, isn't it? When you're talking to people and you suddenly think, oh, hang on, I should be doing that.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's like I went down the other night because I knew I had Woody with me and I knew he needed to go out again. And I drove down to the river, and it was a beautiful evening. And in the end, what I did is I threw the ball for him for a bit, and then he laid down somewhere to chew on it because that's what he likes. So I got my little portable chair out and I sat and read, and it was just so nice.
Lovely.
And I just thought, well, that was so easy to do. It was just down from the Runnymede, and But it's so easy not to do as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And for when we're in a state of stress or anxiety, which unfortunately happens a lot with people going through divorce and separation, they just don't think that it can be as simple as that. Just sort of taking time out with your favorite chocolate biscuits and a lovely cup of tea or something while watching something silly on the television for 20 minutes or whatever it is can make all the difference to how you feel for the rest of the day.
Absolutely. Just a huge impact, even though it's such a small thing to do. So, Rhiannon, just before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you two things. So, two pieces of advice, possibly. So, if somebody is, so I'm thinking of a potential client, basically. So, somebody who might be thinking about speaking to you, but they don't know that you exist. What sort of things should they think about? So I'm not thinking about how they contact you, but just what should people think about if they're considering divorce or thinking that their relationship isn't going well? Do you have any top tips?
Okay, I think the first thing is to get as much clarity as possible about how far through they are on their thinking. So, because I think it's always really important when we work with a professional or actually even talk out loud to be as clear as we can about where we think we are with our thinking, so that the person we're going to for the help knows, where that person is to be able to. So it's always very helpful for me. And I sometimes ask quite direct questions, as to whether they're in the thinking process or have they made a decision. And that's not me trying to tie them down into that, but just for me to have a bit of an idea of how steady to take things and what information they might need. So that can be quite helpful. So that can be quite difficult. So getting clarity in a difficult situation like that can be difficult. And what tends to happen is, people might think, what do I want to achieve? So they might know they're unhappy. How unhappy are they? And what do they want to do about that? So getting clear on that can be helpful as well. Do they want to investigate whether they could stay together, even though they want to get some answers about what would happen if they didn't? Mm-hmm. So the three, for anybody considering a divorce, there are sort of three topics really for them to think about. The first one, and these aren't in priority order, but the first one is the marriage. So if they're married, do they want to be unmarried, or are they not thinking about that at the present time? The second one is about money. So if they did separate, are they thinking they want everything formalized, or are they wanting, for example, a trial separation, or, because there are lots of different options. There isn't just you stay together or you divorce. And also think through what they might want to put in place if they were to make a certain decision about the children arrangements. So from the sort of adult spouse perspective, they might think, I'm not happy with this person. And then it's worth thinking about, well, in relation to those three topics, or two, if they don't have children, what are their thoughts and feelings about what they might want to do about them being unhappy, because obviously they'll need to decide how they want to approach it.
So it's partially, if I'm hearing right, it's partially almost separating yourself from the emotion of I'm unhappy, but now thinking about the more practicalities of what life would look like if I did say I wanted to separate, or I wanted to do this, or what the money situation would look like. So I guess the more rational thought, which is harder to get to when you're feeling emotional about something. Is that right?
It is difficult. I suppose that's what differentiates me between if they went to see a therapist and they come to see me. So I do provide a lot of support. That's a very important part of what I do. But I'm more about where are you now and where do you want to be? Whereas if they went to see a therapist, that therapist might be where are you now? And where have you been, or how have you got to where you are? So I think with my sort of coaching training and legal background, it fits quite well that I find out where they are now, where do they possibly want to be, and then I can talk through how they might get there, but only so that they can just use it as a fact-finding exercise to think things through, to decide and get clarity for themselves, because it's obviously their decision and it's a big decision. And it's very difficult.
It's a life-changing decision, isn't it? Of, what you've been, however long it's been. Okay, so the second one was around as a business owner. So if you were speaking to somebody who was either thinking of or was just in the process of setting up their own business, whatever it was, are there any key tips or things that you think, oh, if only somebody had told me that before I started?
Yep. Oh, gosh.
I would have done it differently, or I would have put it in place, or...
How long have you got?
Second episode.
I think for me, talking to somebody who's ahead of where you are. So I think if you're, however sort of early you are in sort of starting the business, whether it's you've got this idea or whether you're sort of starting to launch it, see if you can talk to somebody who's been doing it a little while, because they'll still be able to remember you sort of the things to think about. So I think not being afraid to ask somebody who's already doing it, trying to use somebody who's doing it well, obviously that could be helpful. And also to appreciate how many different hats you have to wear. Sorry, I've been talking about hats a lot today. But the fact that I think, as I said earlier, I was very naive thinking, I knew there would be other parts to being a business owner, but it wasn't, don't enter the business world, as it were, just based on, I want to do this. I want to be a divorce consultant. Do bear in mind that for that to be a business and a viable business, you're going to need to learn about marketing, learning about accounts, learn about, all sorts of things. I mean, business development, there are lots of different areas of running a business that's worth thinking through before you get too overexcited about the actual business itself. So I think, knowing that there are other things involved would have been very helpful. I mean, I did know, but I didn't sort of, I hadn't sort of put it together. And also talking to somebody who's already sort of ahead of the game. I think those would be my 2 tips.
Excellent advice. Thank you. And is there anything you want to say just before we wrap up? Any final words to people?
I would say that going through divorce and separation is a very difficult time for anybody. Nobody gets married ever thinking they're going to face a divorce or a separation. But it doesn't have to be the end of the world. And I know that I don't mean that to sound flippant, but there can be happiness after divorce. I'm in contact with lots of my clients who are great examples of the fact that, you can have a successful and happy life after divorce. But there's no rush either. So get the right advice from the right people to help you make strong, informed decisions about what you might want to do.
That is really wonderful, Rhiannon. It's been really interesting hearing more about this, because while I've known you for a while, we've never really talked in any depth about what you do. So it's been really interesting from all of the different angles. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I've been in conversation with Rhiannon Ford of the Rhiannon Ford Divorce Consultancy. If you'd like to get in touch with Rhiannon, please contact her at rhiannonford.co.uk. All of her details are available in the show notes. Are you considering your own podcast? Why not check out So You Think You Want Your Own Podcast? It's an online course that introduces you to everything that's involved in hosting a podcast, as well as working with you to define your own podcast concept. You can get more information on it at startyourownpodcast.bridginggaps.uk. Bridging Gaps, the business podcast, was produced by Deborah Levitt of Bridge Road Consultants Limited, with original music provided by Pete Dineley.
You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the business podcast.